Okay, welcome. We are starting another mini lecture and we are moving into the second half of Module 4. So this is the beginning of Module 4B for our English 037 class. So we're moving into this really important topic, the largest and most significant writing topic that we're going to be focusing on for the rest of the semester, which is essay writing. So just as I introduced sentences by going through level 1, level 2, level 3, and so on and so forth, we will also do a series of mini lectures on essay writing that will also move through the levels from basic to more complex. And we're actually going to look at two different main formats of essay writing. The first one is the most common one, and that's the compare and contrast format, which we've already been working with compare and contrast a fair bit this semester. So it should be fairly easy to take some of the skills we already know from our sentence and paragraph writing for comparison and contrast and translate them into the essay. So this lecture is called Level 1.0, a general discussion of comparison and contrast format, essay writing. Here we go. So essay writing, the basic structure. Let's talk a little bit about the structural rules of how to compose an essay. So you always want to start with a topic paragraph, an introductory paragraph that is going to kind of set up both the main idea of your essay, the main purpose or thrust, but it's also going to provide a little bit of background. And there's some very specific components that you need, and these are uh, the three types of sentences that we'll use in our introductory paragraph. The first is your hook sentence, and this sentence, it's basically a metaphorical description of the purpose of that sentence. So just like when you're trying to catch a fish, you need a hook to catch the fish. When you're trying to catch an audience, you need a hook sentence to catch your audience. So your hook sentence should be something that is kind of clever. It should be kind of bold and sharp. It should be an idea that might be interesting or might leave the reader kind of going, huh, what does that mean? I need to find out more. So you're trying to draw them in with the idea. That's your hook sentence. Then the next type of sentences are called framing sentences, or sometimes I also refer to them as background sentences. So normally you'll take 2 to 3 sentences to establish some relevant background information about the topic you're discussing. And after your hook and your framing sentences have been composed and set up, then you move into your thesis. And the thesis is the most important sentence in your introduction because it puts forward both your purpose, kind of what you're trying to accomplish with the essay. That's part one of your thesis. And then your plan, your kind of order of operations, which also usually shows up in the form of a guiding list. So, I'm going to compare and contrast the characters of The Lord of the Rings. In particular, I'll be looking at similarities and differences between Frodo and Sam. So there you have the purpose, and then you also have how you're going to do it, who you're going to be focusing on. So that's an example of a thesis. Okay, so after you've finished your introductory paragraph, then you're going to move into your main body paragraphs. There's usually 1 to 3 main body paragraphs in a standard essay. And within the main body paragraphs, you will be following that operational list that you set up in your thesis. Then you're going to move into your concluding paragraph, the last paragraph, and all that does is it kind of wraps everything up. It clarifies for the reader, hey, we've arrived at the end, and you'll end up restating some of your main ideas in a new way. So all paragraphs, as a reminder of some of the general rules, all paragraphs need to be indented. The first line needs to be indented. All of the ideas that you're setting up, we want them to be established and then supported by citations. Just like we've been doing in our paragraphs, the last few weeks we've been building analysis paragraphs, and we've been using what I've been calling our 3-window lens, or where we're looking at 3 different points, right? And analyzing through those different lenses is a really clever way to write every one of your main body paragraphs. They'll even be more pointed in terms of their purpose, though, because we'll know that each main body paragraph has a very specific job that it's trying to accomplish. And also, it's important to mention that for the essays in my class, we'll be following APA formatting rules. That means you need a header, you need page numbers, your main body, all of your writing should be double spaced, and your citations should be following proper APA format, just like we've already learned. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the introduction paragraph, get into the details here, the nitty gritty. Usually we'll be expecting between 100 and 225 words in length for an introductory paragraph. So again, just a reminder that hook sentence needs to be clear and sharp, and it should catch the reader's interest. Then you're going to have those 2 to 4 framing sentences, and their goal is to provide surrounding or background information without absolutely going into too much detail. So this is a bit of a Goldilocks situation where you want the porridge to be just right. You don't want the porridge to be too hot. You don't want it to be too cold. You want it to be just the right temperature. So there I'm using a metaphor to establish that you want to have a lot of information. It should be background information, but you shouldn't be moving into the main purpose of your essay yet. Then we move to our all-important thesis statement or thesis sentence, and those are the 2 parts highlighted in blue there. First, you state your purpose very clearly, and then you're also going to include a guiding list, which will essentially establish the operational plan for your main body paragraphs. Okay, moving into the main body paragraphs now. They should be between 200 and 350 words in length, and a general rule is, like, let's say you're writing a comparison and contrast essay, just like the example I set up before where we're comparing and contrasting Frodo and Sam, those 2 characters from Lord of the Rings. I'll actually be developing that example throughout this discussion of essays to kind of show you the process of writing an essay for a few different types of topics. And the reason we have such a big kind of available gap in the word length is because you always want to start with your weakest idea, and then you want to build towards your strongest idea. So like if you were comparing and contrasting Frodo and Sam, for example, and you had a couple of different themes that you noticed in terms of their similarity or difference. Like the first one might be their background. The second one might be kind of their skills. The third one might be their character, like who they are inside, right? And let's say that you feel like the character paragraph, you have the most evidence to talk about that paragraph. That one you would want that would come third. Let's say their background is the idea that you think is the weakest idea. You'd want that one to come first. That'd be main body paragraph 1 coming right after your introduction. So always be strategic in the way you organize your paragraphs as well. You should think carefully about it. Okay, so let's talk about the guts of your main body paragraphs. So you always need to have a clear topic sentence as your first sentence, and that's going to be following, as I mentioned before, it's going to be following that guiding list that you established in your thesis, right? So like if my thesis said I'll be comparing and contrasting Frodo and Sam in terms of their background, their skills, and their character as individuals, then I would have to remind the reader that I'd clearly stated already that I'm going to talk about their origins first, their background first, and that would have to be part of my topic sentence. So then you're going to follow that very simple establishment that we've already created, this idea of the triad of support, right? Where you have your kind of your main idea, then the examples of it, and then the citation evidence that's going to prove what you're talking about. And within the main body paragraph, you're probably going to want to repeat that pattern at least 2 times, possibly 3 times. Now here's the key point. After you have kind of set up the main idea and shown the example and then given your citation, by the way, the order of those last 2 can be flipped if you want to be bold. You can move things around as long as you have the component pieces. But the key point is you need to analyze and explain how your citation proves what you're saying. A lot of students will just state the evidence and then they won't talk about it at all. And for a reader, we need that discussion piece to really give clear explanation, to give clear guidance to the reader showing how you've connected your ideas in your voice, right? And then we know that from our triad of support, your citation will be in the past tense, and then your analysis will be in the present tense. You'll actually change the tense of the verbs, and that will guide the reader to let them understand, hey, this one here is my citation because my signal verb is in the past tense. This one here is my explanation or my analysis because I've shifted the verb tense to the present tense. We're going to ask you to use the linking tools that we've already established. So those are those little transitional phrases, or I sometimes call them cues. And they're words like, similarly or on the other hand. And we'll usually see that linking tool and then a comma, and then the main sentence starts after. And always at the end of a main body paragraph, you can choose to wrap things up cleanly, but you also have the option to project forward and kind of leave a breadcrumb or set forward a breadcrumb that's going to kind of guide the reader smoothly to the next main idea that you're going to talk about. Okay, so we're moving along nicely here. Let's talk about the conclusion paragraph. Now you'll notice it's a little bit shorter, right? If you notice we got 200 to 350 for main body. Remember that the introductory paragraph was 100 to 225, and then the conclusion's shortest. It's 75 to 150. So when you're doing your concluding paragraphs, you always want to start with concluding cue, because then the reader knows we've arrived at the end. Here's a list of the common ones. I'll ask you to use one of these in your own essay. In conclusion, to conclude. In summation, to sum up. To summarize, to wrap up. Another one is to finalize. And that's a fairly strong list of concluding cues. Then the first sentence that comes after that concluding cue should restate your thesis in a new way, often in a shorter way. Often you don't have to include the guiding list because the reader knows those ideas have already been fully established, right? Then you're going to try to, this is the trickiest part here, you try to expand that idea out and make connecting insights to a larger relevance or a larger significance. Maybe you'll move out of talking just about the novel that you're looking at and try to make connections to society at large, or how the insights that you've discovered in your investigation of that piece of literature or that novel connects to something in the real world. And then, yeah, this is exactly supporting what I just said. You want to finish with some sort of a final lesson or a final insight. Okay, now this is strictly a review. So here's some of those cues that we use for comparison and contrast. Similarity cues are also additionally, moreover, furthermore, similarly, in correlation. I think that one's a new one, proving the same point. And notice you always have the cue and then your comma. Difference cues are on the other hand, comma, on the contrary, comma, contrarily, comma, however, comma, in opposition, comma, conversely, or in contrast. And again, notice, as I kind of pointed out there, each one of them has a comma directly after the cue, and then you'd go into the idea. So use these strategically if you are writing a comparison and contrast essay.